The massive ship called Eternal Harmony floated in the dark space between stars. It was the biggest and most important ship in a fleet of 200 vessels. The ship was so large that a person could walk for hours and never see all of it. Its metal walls gleamed with strange lights and its engines hummed with power that could move mountains. Inside the ship, thousands of beings from different worlds worked together. There were the Zephyrians, who looked like walking crystals and thought in perfect mathematics. The Mantoids resembled giant insects with forearms and minds that could plan battles across entire star systems. The Depth Dwellers were fish-like creatures who lived in water tanks and could speak to computer minds better than anyone else. And then there were the humans. Park Dae-ho wiped his hands on his work clothes as he finished checking a pipe in the lower levels of the ship. He was 45 years old, with gray hair at his temples and oil stains on his fingers that never seemed to wash away completely. The other species often looked at humans like they were children playing with dangerous toys. The aliens had machines that could think and fix problems automatically. Humans still used hammers and screwdrivers. "All done here," Kim So-ra called from across the room. She was 28 and small, but she could crawl into spaces that even the flexible Depth Dwellers could not reach. Her black hair was tied back and her tool belt was heavy with simple instruments that the aliens thought were ancient. Lee Tae-min looked up from his workstation where he was checking electrical readings. He was 35 and very careful about everything he did. He wrote down every number and double-checked every connection. "The power flow is normal in this section," he reported in his quiet voice. Choi Han-ah was sitting on the floor with the panel of a computer opened in front of her. She was 31 and could fix any electronic device with just basic tools and spare parts. "This old girl is running smooth," she said, patting the machine like it was a pet. The 4 humans worked in the deepest parts of the ship, in places where the air was hot and the noise was loud. The alien engineers worked in clean, quiet rooms, with screens and buttons. They did not like to get their hands dirty. Suddenly, the ship shook. Park Dae-ho grabbed the wall as the lights flickered. What was that? The ship shook again, harder this time. Alarms started ringing throughout the massive vessel. Red lights flashed on the walls, and a voice spoke in the common language that all species understood. "Emergency. All crew to stations. Emergency." Kim So-ra stood up quickly. That didn't feel like an engine problem. The 4 humans looked at each other. They had been working on spaceships for years, and they knew the difference between normal problems and serious ones. This felt serious. Above them, in the main engineering section, Chief Engineer Veltar moved between tall machines that hummed and blinked with thousands of lights. Veltar looked like a person made of blue crystal, and when he thought, tiny lights moved through his transparent body. He was the smartest engineer in the fleet, and his mathematical mind could solve problems that would take human computers hours to work through. But now, Veltar was confused. "The quantum drive is losing power," reported one of his assistants, another crystal being whose lights flashed red with worry. "Life support systems are failing in sections 12 through 30, called another. "The gravity generators are overheating," said a third. Veltar's crystal body flickered as he tried to process all the information. His advanced computer systems were showing him readings that made no sense. The ship's artificial mind, which was smarter than 1,000 organic brains working together, could not explain what was happening. "Run full diagnostics on all systems," Veltar ordered. Around him, machines began scanning every part of the great ship. On the command bridge, Fleet Commander Grick stood on 4 insect-like legs as he watched the main screen. His compound eyes could see 1,000 different views at once, and his tactical mind was already thinking about what would happen if the flagship was lost. The Eternal Harmony was more than just the biggest ship. It was the brain of the entire fleet. Every other ship depended on it for navigation, communication, and command decisions. If it failed, 200 ships and 500,000 beings would be lost in the empty space between stars. "Status report." Grix clicked in his insect language, which the ship's computers translated instantly. "Multiple system failures across all levels," reported his second officer. "The engineering teams are working to identify the cause." Thane, the Depth Dweller who served as the ship's connection to its artificial mind, floated in his water tank near the command center. His large eyes looked worried as he spoke through the water. The ship's mind is confused. It cannot understand the pattern of failures. Each system that fails seems to cause two more to break down. Grix's insect face could not show emotion, the way human faces could, but his body language showed his concern. Time until complete failure? Unknown, Thane replied. The failures are spreading faster than we can repair them. Back in the main engineering section, Veltar and his team worked frantically. Their computers ran millions of calculations every second. Their diagnostic machines scanned every wire and circuit in the ship. But nothing they found explained why the ship was tearing itself apart. The quantum drive should be stable, one engineer reported. All readings are within normal parameters. Life support systems show no mechanical failures, said another. Yet they continue to malfunction. Veltar's crystal body began to dim as he processed the impossible data. In his logical mind, the ship could not be failing this way. Every system had backups. Every critical component had been tested millions of times. The eternal harmony was supposed to be perfect. But perfect machines do not shake themselves apart for no reason. Sir, one of his assistants said carefully, perhaps we should consider alternative approaches. Veltar's lights flickered with what might have been embarrassment. Alternative approaches meant asking for help from species with less advanced technology. It meant admitting that the most sophisticated engineering minds in the galaxy could not solve this problem. Send a message to Commander Grix, Veltar said finally. Tell him we may need additional perspectives. Deep in the lower levels, Park Dae-ho felt another shudder run through the ship. This one was different. It felt like something deep inside. The vessel was coming loose. We should get up there, Kim Sora said. They might need us. Lee Taemin was already packing his tools. The ship is in real trouble. I can feel it in the walls. Choi Hana closed her computer panel and stood up. Whatever's wrong, their fancy machines can't fix it, or it would be fixed already. Park Dae-ho nodded. He had spent his whole life working with machines, and he knew that sometimes the most complex problems had the simplest causes. Sometimes, you had to stop looking at computer screens and start looking with your own eyes. Come on, he said. Let's go see what's really wrong with this ship. The four humans gathered their tools and headed for the upper levels, not knowing that they were about to save the most advanced spaceship ever built, with nothing more than wrenches, wire cutters, and the willingness to get their hands dirty. The emergency call reached Park Dae-ho and his team as they climbed through the maintenance shafts toward the upper levels. The message was short and direct. Report to main engineering immediately. When they arrived, they found chaos. Veltar stood in the center of the engineering bay, his crystal body flashing with rapid calculations. Around him, dozens of alien engineers worked at glowing screens and control panels. The air hummed with the sound of powerful computers working at their maximum capacity. The quantum drive fluctuations are increasing, one Zephyrian engineer reported, his crystal form pulsing red with stress. Artificial gravity is failing in sections 40 through 60, called another. Life support systems are now offline in 30% of the ship, added a third. Park Dae-ho watched the frantic activity and noticed something the aliens missed. They were all staring at their screens and reading their instruments, but none of them were actually looking at the ship itself. Commander Grix arrived on the engineering deck, his 4 insect legs clicking rapidly on the metal floor. His compound. Eyes surveyed the scene quickly. Status report, Chief Engineer. Veltar's lights dimmed with what humans would recognize as embarrassment. We have run complete diagnostics on all systems. The ship's artificial intelligence has analyzed every possible failure mode. Our most advanced computers cannot identify the cause of these cascading failures. Time until total system collapse? Grix asked. At current rate of failure spread, approximately 6 hours. Veltar admitted. Grix's insect head turned toward the small group of humans who had just arrived. Park Dae-ho could see the hesitation in the commander's body language. Asking humans for help was like asking children to fix a broken star. Perhaps, Grix said slowly, we should consider all available resources. Veltar's crystal body flickered, with what might have been offense. Commander, these failures are beyond the scope of primitive engineering methods. We need advanced theoretical solutions, not manual labor. Kim So-ra stepped forward. She was young and small compared to the, towering aliens, but her voice was confident. With respect, sir, but if your advanced methods were working, the ship wouldn't be falling apart right now. Several Zephyrian engineers flashed bright red at her boldness. In their culture, junior beings did not speak to superiors this way. Park. Daeho put a gentle hand on Kim So-ra's shoulder. What my colleague means is that we might see things differently. Sometimes a fresh perspective helps. Lee Taemin was already looking around the engineering bay with his careful eyes. When did the failures start exactly? Approximately 4 hours ago during our jump through hyperspace, Veltar replied stiffly. And where did they start? Choi, Hana asked. Veltar gestured to a wall display that showed the ship's layout. Red indicators marked failing systems throughout the vessel. The pattern appears random. There is no logical progression. Park Daeho studied the display for a long moment. To the aliens, the red marks looked random. But to his experienced eyes, they seemed to follow the ship's structure rather than its electronic systems. Can we see the ship's original construction plans, he asked. Construction plans? Veltar's lights flickered with confusion. We have the complete technical specifications, of course. No, I mean the actual building plans. How the ship was put together piece by piece. The aliens exchanged glances. Their technology was so advanced that they thought in terms of final products, not construction processes. But after a moment, Veltar called up another display. The Eternal Harmony had been built by 4 different species working together. The Zephyrians had designed the power systems with crystalline precision. The Mantoids had created the defensive and tactical systems with military efficiency. The Depth Dwellers had built the computer and communication networks with organic intuition. A 4th species, the Builders, had constructed the hull and basic structure with mathematical perfection. Each species had used their own methods, their own materials, their own way of thinking about how machines should work. Lee Taemin traced the construction lines with his finger. Look at this. Each species built their section separately, then they connected everything together. Of course, Veltar said. Each civilization contributed their expertise to create the perfect vessel. But did they test how all these different systems would work together over time? Choi Hana asked. The integration protocols were mathematically verified, Veltar insisted. Every interface was calculated to perfection. Kim So-ra was studying the failure pattern more closely. The first failures happened in the junction areas, where one species' technology meets another's. Park Daeho nodded slowly. He was beginning to understand what the advanced diagnostic systems could not see. We need to look at the actual connections, not the computer readouts, the physical hardware. That is unnecessary, Veltar protested. Our sensors can detect any physical problem with greater accuracy than organic observation. Can they? Park Daeho asked quietly. Because right now, your sensors are telling you everything is fine, but your ship is still breaking apart. The engineering bay fell silent except for the humming of machines and the distant sound of alarms from other parts of the ship. Commander Grix made a decision. Show them what they want to see. Veltar's crystal body flashed with reluctance, but he led the humans to a maintenance access panel. When it opened, they could see into the ship's inner workings. Pipes, cables, and conduits ran in all directions. Everything looked clean and organized. But Park Daeho knelt down and peered closely at a junction where a Zephyrian power cable connected to a Mantoid control system. The connection looked perfect from a distance, but up close he could see something. The sensors had missed. Choi Hana, bring your light over here. She shined her handheld light on the connection. There, almost invisible to the eye, were tiny stress fractures in the metal, where 2 different alloys had been joined together. The metals are incompatible, Park Daeho said. They expand and contract at different rates. Over time, the connections develop microfractures. That is impossible, Veltar said. The materials were selected for compatibility. Lee Taemin was examining another junction. This one has the same problem, and this one. He moved to several, More connections, each time finding the same tiny cracks. Kim Sora crawled deeper into the access tunnel. It's everywhere. Every place where two different technologies connect, there are stress fractures. But our sensors show no structural damage, one of the Zephyrian engineers protested. Your sensors are looking for big problems, Choi Hana explained as she examined the cracks with a magnifying glass. These fractures are so small that each one doesn't matter. But when you have thousands of them all over the ship, they start to interfere with each other. Park Dae-ho stood up and brushed dust off his knees. The hyperspace jump created vibrations that resonated through all these tiny cracks at once. That's what started the cascade failure. Veltar's crystal body went dim as he processed this information. His advanced computers had been looking for sophisticated problems. They had never considered that thousands of tiny, simple problems could add up to destroy the most advanced spaceship ever built. Even if this is correct, Veltar said slowly, how do we repair thousands of microfractures throughout the entire ship? Kim Sora grinned. That's where we come in. We know how to fix things that aren't supposed to break. The four humans looked at each other with the confidence of people who had spent their lives making broken machines work again. They had tools the aliens had forgotten how to use. They had skills the aliens thought were primitive. Most importantly, they had the experience of working with imperfect systems and making them better. Commander Grix watched the exchange with growing hope. His tactical mind could see that the humans offered something his advanced engineers could not. The ability to see problems that perfect technology couldn't detect, and the willingness to fix them with whatever tools were available. What do you need? He asked Park Dae-ho. The human engineer smiled. Time, access to the ship's structure, and permission to do things that your engineers are going to think are crazy. You have it, Grix replied without hesitation. As alarms continued to echo through the massive ship, the four humans began preparing to save the most sophisticated vessel in the galaxy, with nothing more than hand tools, spare parts, and the knowledge that sometimes the best solutions are the simplest ones. The ship shuddered again as Park Dae-ho spread out his simple tools on a work table. Around him, the alien engineers watched with expressions that ranged from curiosity to horror. The humans were preparing to do something that went against everything the advanced civilizations believed about proper engineering. We need to create controlled failures in specific systems, Park Dae-ho explained to Commander Grix and Veltar. Think of it like resetting a computer, but we have to do it for the entire ship. Veltar's crystal body flickered rapidly as he processed this concept. You want to deliberately damage our systems? Not damage, Kim Sora corrected as she checked her wire cutters. We want to interrupt the cascade failure pattern by breaking it in specific places. This is insane, one of the Zephyrian engineers whispered to another. They want to destroy a perfectly functioning starship. It's not perfectly functioning, Lee Taemin pointed out calmly as another alarm sounded in the distance. Right now, all your systems are fighting each other because they're trying to work together in ways they weren't designed for. Choi Hana was examining a schematic of the ship's power distribution system. Look, when the builders connected all these different technologies, they created what we call interference loops. Each system tries to compensate for problems in the other systems, but that just makes everything worse. She traced her finger along the power lines on the display. The Zephyrian systems run on crystal resonance frequencies. The Mantoid systems use plasma pulse technology. The Depth Dweller systems work with organic neural patterns. The Builder systems use pure mathematical calculations. Yes, Veltar said impatiently. We are aware of our own technologies. But, are you aware of how they interfere with each other? Park Dae-ho asked. He pulled out a simple electronic device that looked ancient compared to the alien equipment. This little scanner can detect electromagnetic interference. Your advanced sensors ignore it because they're designed to filter out noise. He walked over to one of the junction points they had examined earlier and held up his device. It beeped rapidly. Every place where your different technologies connect, they're creating interference patterns. Normally, your ship's AI compensates for this automatically. Correct. Thane's voice bubbled from his water tank through the ship's communication system. The ship's mind maintains balance between all systems. But what happens when there are too many problems for the AI to handle at once? Kim So-ra asked. Thane's large eyes blinked slowly in his tank. The ship's mind becomes overwhelmed. It cannot process all the conflicting information. Exactly, Park Dae-ho said. So instead of trying to fix everything at once, we're going to give the ship's AI a chance to restart itself by temporarily removing the conflicting signals. The concept was simple, but executing it would be incredibly dangerous. The humans would have to shut down critical systems in a precise sequence while keeping life support and structural integrity intact. One mistake could kill everyone on board. Commander Grix's compound eyes studied the humans carefully. His tactical mind understood desperate situations and calculated risks. What are the chances of success? Park Dae-ho was honest. We don't know. We've never tried this on anything this big or this complex, but we know what will happen if we don't try. The ship answered for him by shaking violently as another wave of failures cascaded through its systems. Emergency lighting flickered on as main power fluctuated. The quantum drive is approaching critical instability, one of the Zephyrian engineers reported with panic in his crystalline voice. Artificial gravity has failed in 70% of the ship, added another. Commander. Grix made his decision. Do it. The humans moved quickly but carefully. Kim So-ra headed for the power distribution center with a bag full of tools that looked like they belonged in a museum. Lee Tae-min went to the auxiliary control room to monitor system status during the shutdown sequence. Choi Hana positioned herself at the main computer interface to manually control the restart process. Park Dae-ho remained in the main engineering bay to coordinate the entire operation and handle any unexpected problems. First, we isolate the Zephyrian crystal resonance systems, he called into his simple radio headset. The aliens watched in amazement as the humans communicated with devices that didn't even use the ship's communication network. Kim So-ra's voice crackled back. Standing by at Power Junction 7. I can see the crystal matrix connections. On my mark, Park Dae-ho said. 3, 2, 1, mark. In the power center, Kim So-ra used a simple wrench to manually disconnect a series of connections that the Zephyrian engineers insisted could only be safely handled by automated systems. Sparks flew as she worked, but her steady hands never hesitated. Immediately, half the lights in the engineering bay went out. Several alien engineers cried out in alarm. Crystal systems offline, Lee Tae-min reported from his monitoring station. Interference patterns dropping in sectors 1 through 15. Good, Park Dae-ho said calmly. Next, we isolate the mantoid plasma systems. Choi Hana, are you ready? Ready, she replied. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor next to an open computer panel, holding a handful of wires that she had carefully separated from the main systems. Mark. Choi Hana pulled 3 specific wires and quickly connected them to a bypass circuit she had built from spare parts. The ship's defensive systems went offline, but the interference between the plasma technology and the other systems stopped immediately. Plasma systems isolated, Lee Tae-min reported. Overall system stress decreasing. The process continued through each type of technology. The humans worked with tools and techniques that the aliens had not used in centuries. They created bypasses, built temporary circuits, and manually controlled systems that were designed to be automated. Veltar watched in fascination as Kim So-ra rewired a critical power junction using nothing but basic tools and spare parts. How do you know that will work? He asked. I don't, she admitted cheerfully as sparks flew around her hands. But I know what won't work, and that's what we had before. The most dangerous moment came when they had to restart the ship's main AI while all the systems were disconnected. For 30 seconds, the massive ship drifted in space with no central control, no automated systems, and no way to coordinate its various functions. In those 30 seconds, the humans were the only thing keeping 200 ships and 500,000 beings alive. AI restart complete, Thane reported, his voice filled with something that might have been relief. The ship's mind is clearer now. The conflicting signals are gone. Beginning system restoration, Park Dae-ho announced. Kim So-ra, bring the crystal systems back online, but keep them isolated from the main power grid. Isolated crystal systems coming online, she reported, around the ship. Lights began to flicker back to life, but they were connected through the temporary circuits she had built, rather than the original connections. One by one, the humans brought each system back online. But instead of connecting them the way they had been before, they used their improvised bypasses and temporary circuits to prevent the interference patterns from reforming. Plasma systems online and isolated. Depth-dweller neural networks restored and buffered. Builder mathematical processors active with manual overrides. When all systems were running again, the ship felt different. Instead of the perfectly smooth operation the aliens expected, there was something more organic about how everything worked together. The systems cooperated rather than competing. All systems stable, Lee Taemin reported. No cascade failures detected. Commander Grix's compound eyes showed amazement. How long will these repairs hold? Park Dae-ho wiped his hands on his work clothes. The temporary fixes should last long enough to get us to a proper shipyard. But the real solution is going to be redesigning how all these different technologies work together. Veltar's crystal body had been dim with thought throughout the repair process. Now his lights began to brighten. I believe I understand now. Our technologies are not incompatible, but our approach to integration was flawed. We tried to force perfect cooperation instead of allowing natural balance. Exactly, Choi Hana said as she packed up her improvised circuits. Sometimes the best solution isn't the most elegant one. Sometimes you just need something that works. The ship no longer shook with cascade failures. The alarms had stopped. The emergency lighting had been replaced by normal illumination. The most advanced starship in the galaxy was running on a combination of sophisticated alien technology and human jury-rigged solutions that shouldn't work according to any engineering textbook, but somehow did. The repair work took 18 hours of continuous effort. Park Dae-ho moved through the ship like a conductor leading an orchestra, coordinating repairs across dozens of decks and hundreds of systems. His radio crackled constantly with updates from his team members scattered throughout the massive vessel. Power coupling 7 is holding steady, Kim So-ra reported from deep in the ship's engine section. She had been crawling through maintenance tunnels for hours, replacing damaged connections with handmade bypasses. Her work clothes were torn and stained with oils and coolants, but her voice remained strong. Around her, Zephyrian engineers watched, in amazement as she worked with tools they considered primitive. She used a simple wrench to adjust connections that their automated systems insisted required computer guidance. When a power coupling sparked dangerously, she calmly wrapped it with insulating tape instead of replacing it with a perfectly manufactured component. How do you know that will hold? Asked Kiratal, a young Zephyrian engineer whose crystal body flickered with curiosity. Kim So-ra tightened the tape and checked the connection with her basic voltage meter. I don't know it will hold forever, but I know it will hold long enough for us to get somewhere safe. She grinned at the crystal being. Sometimes good enough is better than perfect. In the auxiliary control room, Lee Taemin sat surrounded by displays showing the status of every system on the ship. Unlike the main engineering bay with its automated monitoring, this room required manual observation and control. Lee Taemin's careful eyes tracked hundreds of readings simultaneously, watching for problems that the ship's AI might miss. Section 12 showing minor power fluctuations, he reported calmly into his radio. Adjusting manually. His hands moved across old-fashioned switches and dials, making tiny adjustments to keep the ship's systems balanced. The alien engineers had tried to automate everything, but Lee Taemin understood that complex systems sometimes needed a human touch to keep them running smoothly. A Mantoid tactical officer observed his work with growing respect. Your methods are effective, the insect-like being admitted. But how do you process so much information without computer assistance? Lee Taemin smiled as he adjusted another control. Practice, and understanding that you don't need to process everything perfectly. You just need to notice when something is wrong and fix it before it becomes a big problem. In the main computer core, Choi Hana worked in conditions that horrified the depth-dweller technicians. She sat cross-legged on the floor with computer panels open around her, surrounded by a web of temporary connections that she had built from spare parts and salvaged components. Her improvised circuits bypassed damaged systems and created new pathways for information to flow through the ship. Every connection was different, built from whatever materials she could find. To the aliens, it looked like chaos. To Choi Hana, it was simply practical engineering. The organic neural networks are stabilizing, Thane reported from his water tank. As the ship's interface with its AI, he could feel the changes in how the ship's mind processed information. The temporary circuits are actually improving data flow in some areas. Choi Hana nodded as she soldered another connection. That's because we're letting each system do what it does best instead of forcing them to work the same way. She pointed to one of her improvised circuits. This bypass lets the Zephyrian crystal systems handle mathematical calculations, while the mantoid plasma systems focus on power regulation. They're not fighting each other anymore. The aliens began to understand that human engineering wasn't about building perfect systems. It was about building systems that could adapt, change, and keep working even when conditions were not ideal. Park Dae-ho faced his greatest challenge in the ship's central core, where all the different technologies came together. This was where the cascade failures had started, and it was where they would return if the repairs were not done correctly. The space was cramped and filled with connections between systems that had never been designed to work together. 4 different species had built their technologies side by side, then connected them with interface systems that were mathematical marvels, but practical nightmares. The quantum drive resonance is still unstable, Veltar reported, his crystal body flickering with concern. The mathematical models predict failure within 6 hours. Park Dae-ho studied the massive quantum drive with his experienced eyes. The alien saw it as a perfect machine that should work according to precise calculations. He saw it as a complex system that was being forced to operate in conditions it wasn't designed for. The drive is fine, he said finally. The problem is that it's trying to synchronize with 3 other technologies that all want to control it differently. He pulled out his simple tools and began disconnecting interface cables. The aliens watched in horror as he bypassed safety systems and created manual controls for the quantum drive. You cannot control a quantum drive manually, Veltar protested. The calculations are too complex for organic minds. I'm not trying to control the calculations, Park Dae-ho explained as he worked. I'm just giving it permission to run its own calculations without interference from the other systems. He created a simple isolation circuit that allowed the quantum drive to communicate with the ship's navigation systems without being affected by power fluctuations from the other technologies. It was an elegant solution that used basic principles instead of complex mathematics. When he finished, the quantum drive settled into a steady rhythm for the first time in hours. The most dangerous moment came when they had to test all the repairs, under real conditions. The ship had to make a jump through hyperspace to prove that the temporary fixes could handle the stress of faster-than-light travel. All stations report ready, Commander Grix announced from the bridge. Park Dae-ho stood in the main engineering bay, watching displays that showed every system on the ship. His 3 team members were positioned at critical points throughout the vessel, ready to make adjustments if problems developed. Beginning hyperspace jump sequence, the navigation officer reported. The ship began to build up energy for the jump. Power flowed through the improvised circuits and temporary bypasses that the humans had created. The quantum drive synchronized with navigation systems through Park Dae-ho's simple isolation circuit. Jump in 10 seconds, came the announcement. The ship entered hyperspace smoothly. Instead of the violent shuddering that had caused the original failures, the transition was stable and controlled. The different technologies worked together through the human modifications, each system doing its job without interfering with the others. Jump complete, the navigation officer reported. All systems stable. A cheer went up from the alien engineers who had watched their perfect ship nearly destroy itself, then watched 4 humans save it with tools and techniques they had dismissed as primitive. But the humans knew their work was not finished. The temporary repairs would hold, but the ship needed permanent solutions if it was going to continue operating safely. We need to redesign the integration protocols, Park Daeho told Commander Grix and Veltar. Your technologies are amazing, but they need to be connected in ways that let them work together instead of fighting each other. Veltar's crystal body brightened with understanding. You are suggesting a fundamental change in how we approach multi-species engineering. Exactly, Kim Sora said as she joined the group, still covered in oil stains from her work in the engine sections. Instead of trying to make everything perfect, make everything adaptable. Lee Tae-min nodded from his position at the monitoring station. Build systems that can handle imperfection and keep working anyway. Choi Hana looked up from her improvised computer circuits. And always leave room for manual control when the automatic systems don't work. The ship continued through space, its systems running smoothly for the first time since the crisis began. But more importantly, the aliens had learned something new about engineering. Sometimes the most advanced solution is knowing when to use simple ones. The four humans had saved the most sophisticated starship in the galaxy, not by building better technology, but by understanding that the best technology is technology that works, even when everything else goes wrong. 3 weeks after the crisis, the Eternal Harmony approached Nexus Station, the largest shipyard in the galaxy. The massive station could service 100 ships at once and housed the most advanced engineering facilities of 12 different civilizations. But as the flagship docked, it carried something more valuable than any technology: new knowledge about how different species could work together. Commander Grix stood in the main conference room with representatives from all the major species in the fleet. The room was filled with beings of crystal, chitin, scales, and flesh, all gathered to hear the official report on the flagship's near destruction and miraculous recovery. The investigation is complete, Grix announced, his compound eyes surveying the assembled crowd. The cascade failure was caused by harmonic resonance between incompatible technologies, triggered by hyperspace transition stress. The failure would have been total within 6 hours. A murmur went through the crowd. The Eternal Harmony was supposed to be the perfect fusion of galactic technology. The idea that it could destroy itself was disturbing to engineers who believed in mathematical perfection. However, Grix continued, the ship was saved through the innovative efforts of our human engineering team, using techniques that our advanced systems could not provide. Park Dae-ho sat quietly in the corner of the room, still wearing his work clothes despite the formal nature of the meeting. He had never been comfortable with ceremonies and speeches. He preferred to let his work speak for itself. But Veltar, the Zephyrian chief engineer, stood up to address the assembly. His crystal body glowed brightly as he spoke. I must confess that I initially dismissed human engineering methods as primitive and inefficient. I was wrong. The admission caused surprised reactions throughout the room. Veltar was known throughout the galaxy for his mathematical perfection and logical precision. The humans showed us that perfection can be the enemy of function, Veltar continued. Their approach is not to build systems that cannot fail, but to build systems that can continue working even when they do fail. Kim Sora stood up from her seat among the human delegation. She looked small compared to the towering aliens, but her voice carried clearly through the room. With respect, we didn't save your ship with primitive methods, she said. We saved it by combining your advanced technology with practical engineering. The best solution used both approaches. Lee Tae-min nodded in agreement. Your computers and sensors are incredibly powerful, but they were designed to look for the kinds of problems that perfect systems should have. They couldn't see the simple problems that real systems actually develop. Choi Hana added, and your automated systems are amazing at handling normal operations. But when something goes wrong that the automation doesn't understand, you need manual controls to keep things working. The alien engineers listened carefully. Many of them had spent the past 3 weeks studying the human repairs and trying to understand how such simple methods could solve problems that their sophisticated technology could not. The implications go beyond ship repair, observed Dr. Thane from his mobile water tank. As the fleet's interface with artificial intelligence, he had been deeply affected by watching the humans work with systems that his AI could not understand. The humans have shown us that intelligence is not just about processing power or calculation speed. What do you mean? Asked a Mantoid tactical officer. Intelligence is also about knowing when to ignore your instruments and use your own judgment, Thane explained. The humans could see problems that our sensors missed because they were willing to look with their own eyes instead of trusting technology completely. Commander Grick stepped forward again. Based on these observations, Command has decided to implement several changes throughout the fleet. The aliens leaned forward with interest. Changes to galactic technology were rare and usually took years of committee meetings and mathematical verification. First, all ships will be equipped with manual override systems for critical functions, Grix announced. Every automated system must have a way for organic beings to control it directly if necessary. Several engineers made notes on their data devices. The concept of manual controls had been largely abandoned as civilizations developed perfect automation. Second, all engineering teams will include training in direct observation and hands-on repair techniques. Our sensors are excellent, but they cannot replace experienced eyes and skilled hands. Park Dae-ho smiled slightly. The idea of advanced aliens learning to use wrenches and screwdrivers was amusing, but he knew it was important for them to understand their technology at the most basic level. Third, all new ship designs must include spaces and equipment for manual maintenance. Our vessels have become so automated that beings cannot access or repair critical systems without shutting down the entire ship. This caused more discussion among the engineers. Modern ships were designed to be maintained by robots and automatic systems. Creating spaces for organic beings to work would require fundamental changes in design philosophy. Finally, Grick said, each ship will carry a mixed engineering team with representatives from multiple species and technological approaches. No single method of thinking about problems should be relied upon completely. Veltar stood up again. I have a proposal to add to these changes. The room fell silent. As the fleet's most respected engineer, Veltar's words carried great weight. I propose that Park Dae-ho be appointed as Chief of Practical Engineering for the entire fleet, with authority to establish training programs and design standards for manual systems throughout our vessels. The suggestion caused excited discussion throughout the room. Appointing a human to such a high position was unprecedented in galactic history. Park Dae-ho looked uncomfortable with the attention, but Commander Grix was already nodding approval. The position is created and the appointment is confirmed. Kim So-ra was appointed to lead the new direct observation training program, teaching alien engineers how to see problems that their instruments might miss. Her fearless attitude and willingness to work in dangerous conditions made her an ideal teacher for beings who had become too dependent on safety systems. Lee Tae-min became the Director of Manual Control Systems, responsible for designing backup controls that organic beings could operate when automated systems failed. His methodical approach and patience made him perfect for the detailed work of creating reliable manual interfaces. Choi Ha-na was named Chief of Adaptive Engineering, tasked with developing repair techniques that could work with whatever materials and tools were available. Her ability to build functional systems from spare parts and improvised components was exactly what the fleet needed for emergency situations. But the most important change was not in positions or policies. It was in how the different species began to think about engineering itself. The Zephyrians learned that mathematical perfection meant nothing if it could not adapt to unexpected conditions. The Mantoids discovered that their tactical precision could be enhanced by human intuition and flexibility. The Depth Dwellers found that their organic approaches to technology worked better when combined with human hands-on experience. And the humans learned that their practical skills could be magnified enormously when combined with alien knowledge and advanced technology. 6 months later, the Eternal Harmony completed a major refit at Nexus Station. The ship looked the same from the outside, but internally it had been transformed. Advanced alien technology now worked alongside simple human systems. Automated controls had manual backups. Perfect mathematical precision was balanced with practical adaptability. Most importantly, the ship's engineering bay was no longer divided between species. Zephyrian crystal beings worked alongside human mechanics. Mantoid tactical engineers collaborated with depth-dweller AI specialists. Each species contributed their strengths while learning from the other's approaches. The ship that had nearly destroyed itself, because its different technologies could not work together, had become a model for how different species could combine their knowledge to create something better than any of them could build alone. Park Dae-ho stood in the renovated engineering bay, watching Kim Sora teach a group of young Zephyrian engineers how to detect stress fractures with simple visual inspection. Nearby, Lee Taemin worked with Mantoid technicians to design manual controls that could be operated by beings with various types of manipulator appendages. Choi Han-ah demonstrated circuit repair techniques to a mixed group of aliens who watched in fascination as she built working systems from discarded components. The galaxy's most advanced spaceship was running better than ever, not because it had become more perfect, but because it had learned to embrace imperfection and work with it. And throughout the fleet, other ships began adopting the same philosophy. The best technology is not the most advanced technology, but the technology that works when everything else fails, operated by beings who understand that sometimes the most sophisticated solution is knowing when to use the simplest one. The humans had saved more than just a ship. They had changed how an entire galaxy thought about engineering, cooperation, and the value of getting your hands dirty when there is important work to be done.